Okay, in this video, we're going to be looking at writing the chemical formula of oxides. How to write the chemical formula of oxides. And in this video, we're going to focus on the oxides of nitrogen, right? So, first of all, what is an oxide? If you are asked what is an oxide? An oxide is a compound formed when oxygen combines with other elements, right? So, an oxide is a compound that is formed when oxygen combines with other elements. So when oxygen combines with nitrogen, it forms an oxide of nitrogen, right? So an oxide is a compound that is formed when oxygen combines with other elements. If I ask you what is an oxide, you simply tell me that an oxide is a compound formed when oxygen combines with other elements, right? So the first example that we have here is what is the chemical formula of nitrogen 1 oxide? How do we write the chemical formula of nitrogen 1 oxide? So to write the chemical formula of oxide, the first thing that you should know, the very basic fact that you should know is that the oxidation number of oxygen in all compound is -2. This is very important. The oxidation number of oxygen in all compounds is -2 except in peroxides where it is -1. So all compounds of oxygen, the oxidation number is always minus what? 2 except in peroxides where it is -1. So in peroxides, the oxidation number of oxygen is what? -1. So therefore, what is a peroxide? So a peroxide is a compound containing oxygen to oxygen single bond. So any compound that contains this oxygen to oxygen single bond where oxygen atoms have an oxidation number of -1 is a peroxide. A peroxide is a compound containing oxygen to oxygen single bond where oxygen atoms have an oxidation number of what? Of -1. So the oxidation number of oxygen in peroxides is -1, while in all other compounds it is what? -2. So we're going to still look at the difference between oxides and peroxides in another video, right? But here, let's focus on how to write the chemical formula of oxides, right? So what is the chemical formula of nitrogen 1 oxide? So when you hear the word or when you hear the name of the compound nitrogen 1 oxide, what comes to your mind? What comes to your mind is that the elements are oxygen and nitrogen and oxygen, right? So first of all, you want to write out the elements that you hear. So the first thing is to write out the elements. So the compound is nitrogen 1 oxide. So the elements are what? They are nitrogen and what? Oxygen. Oxide representing oxygen. Nitrogen is nitrogen, right? So the next thing is to write the oxidation number, right? So we fix the oxidation number to them. Oxidation number. So what is the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound? Nitrogen 1 oxide. So this one is telling you that the oxidation number of nitrogen is 1. And so you are going to write N1, right? You're going to write N1. And then oxide, like I said, oxygen. What is the oxidation number of oxygen? The oxidation number of oxygen in all compounds is -2 except in peroxides, right? And this compound is not a peroxide. This is nitrogen 1 oxide, right? So the oxidation number of oxygen in this compound is what? -2. The oxidation number of oxygen in all compounds is always -2 except in peroxides. So the oxidation number of oxygen here is what? -2. Then the next thing is to write the valency, which is the combining power of an element. The valency is simply removing the charge, right? So the valency of nitrogen in this compound is 1. So this is N1. And the valency of oxygen in this compound, nitrogen 1 oxide, is what? Is 2. Valency is you removing the charge. So this is O2. So After writing this, the next thing is to exchange the valencies, right? You exchange the valencies. So the next thing is exchange of valencies or valency, right? So you exchange the valencies. So here we will now have N2 and here we'll have O1. So you exchange the 1 for 2 in oxygen and then exchange the 2 for 1 in nitrogen, right? So that's what we did. I exchanged the valencies. 2, which is in place of oxygen, will go to nitrogen, and 1 in place of nitrogen will go to oxygen, right? That's the exchange of valency, and that's what we have here. Then the next thing is to write the numbers down, right? So this is N2O1. But 1 is an insignificant number. 1 times O is still 1, O, right? Anything times 1 is equal to that number. O times 1 is O. So therefore, the chemical formula of nitrogen 1 oxide is N2O. This is the chemical formula, right? So it is very simple and straightforward. Let's still look at another example for more clarity. What is the chemical formula of nitrogen 2 oxide? What is the chemical formula of nitrogen 2 oxide? So when you hear the word or when you hear the name of the compound nitrogen 2 oxide, what comes to your mind? What are the elements that comes to your mind? So the first thing that you want to do is to write out the elements that you hear. So the compound is nitrogen 2 oxide. So the two elements I'm basically hearing there is nitrogen and what? Oxygen. Nitrogen 2 oxide. Then the next thing is to write the oxidation number. Oxidation number, right? The next thing is to write the oxidation number. So what is the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound? The oxidation number of nitrogen is 2 because the compound is nitrogen 2 oxide. So the oxidation number of nitrogen here is 2. And then what is the oxidation number of oxygen? Oxidation number of oxygen in all compounds is always what? -2 except in peroxide. So the oxidation number here is -2. It's always -2 except in peroxide. Then the next thing is to write out the valency, right? So what is the valency? Valency is the combining power of an element. It is the oxidation number minus the charge, right? So if you remove the charge from this oxygen, what you now have is the valency of oxygen. So here the valency of nitrogen is 2, so N2, and the valency of oxygen is what? 2, N2. Remove the charge, what you have is your what? Is valency. So the next thing is to exchange the valencies, right? So exchange of valencies. Exchange of valencies. So if I exchange the valencies, it's both 2 2. So 2 go this way, 2 go this way. I will still have N2O2, right? Then the next thing is to is just to write the numbers, the valencies down. So that would be N2O2. So since N2O2, they are both factors, what I can simply do here is to cancel them out. So 2 cancel out 2, right? So what I now have is NO. This is the chemical formula of nitrogen 2 oxide, right? It is very simple and straightforward. Let's look at another example here. What is the chemical formula of nitrogen 3 oxide? Nitrogen 3 oxide. So when I hear the word nitrogen 3 oxide, or when I hear the name of the compound nitrogen 3 oxide, what are the elements that comes to my mind? So the first thing you want to do is to write out the elements that you hear in the name of this compound, nitrogen 3 oxide. So in this compound, I hear nitrogen. There is nitrogen and also there is oxygen, right? So the next thing you want to do is to write out the oxidation number. It's very important. Oxidation number. So what is the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound? So Just as the word indicates, nitrogen 3 oxide, nitrogen 3. So that tells you that the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound is 3. So this is N3. And then oxygen, the oxidation number of oxygen in our compound is always what? -2, except in peroxides. So that is the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound, -2. Then the next thing that you want to do is to write out the valencies. The valency. So valency is the combining power of an element. Like I said, remove the charge, what you have is your valency. So this is N3, and the valency of oxygen is what? O2. That is the valency. Then the next thing you want to do is to do exchange of the valencies. So exchange the valencies. So if we exchange the valencies, 3 will go and meet oxygen and 2 will come and meet what? Nitrogen. So what I will have is N2, that's the 2 crossing from oxygen to nitrogen, and O3. So with this, I've exchanged the valencies, right? Then the next thing is to write them down. So this will be N2O3. So they cannot cancel out, right? This is therefore the chemical formula of nitrogen 3 oxide. It is very simple and straightforward. Then let's look at another example that we have here. What is the chemical formula of nitrogen 4 oxide? What is the chemical formula of nitrogen 4 oxide? So the first thing that you want to do is to write out the elements. So when you hear the name nitrogen 4 oxide, what comes to your mind? You have nitrogen there and you have oxygen there, right? So these are the two basic elements that are there. Then the next thing is to write out the oxidation number. So what is the oxidation number? What is the oxidation number of nitrogen? So the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound, nitrogen 4 oxide, is 4. So this is N4, and the oxidation number of oxygen in this compound is what? -2. The oxidation number of oxygen in all compounds is -2, except in peroxide. So that information is very important. Then the next thing is to write out the valency, right? So what is the valency of nitrogen in this compound? The valency of nitrogen is 4, and the valency of oxygen in this compound is what? Is 2, right? Remove the charge from the oxidation number. What you have is what? Valency. Then the next thing you want to do is to do exchange of valency. So you exchange the valencies. Exchange the valencies. So what that means is that 2 will come and meet nitrogen and 4 will go and meet oxygen. So what I now have is N2O4, right? So with that, I've exchanged the valencies. Then the next thing is to write the superscript down. So that will be N2O4. But you cannot leave your answer like this, because 2 is a multiple of 4. 2 is a factor of 4, and so they can cancel out, right? So 2 here is 1. 2 divided by 4 is 2. Or 4 divided by 2 rather is 2. So what I have here is 1 times n, which will give me what? N. And then O times 2 will give me what? O2, right? So therefore, the chemical formula of nitrogen 4 oxide is NO2. NO2, right? So this is very simple. And then let's look at the last example that we have here. And the last example is, what is the chemical formula of nitrogen 5 oxide? What is the chemical formula of nitrogen 5 oxide? Right? So the first thing that we've always done is to write out the elements. So when you hear the word nitrogen 5 oxide, what comes to your mind? There is nitrogen and also there is oxygen, right? Then the next thing is to write the oxidation number, right? So what is the oxidation number of nitrogen in this compound? Nitrogen 5 oxide. That tells you that the oxidation number of nitrogen is what? Is 5. And then the oxidation number of oxygen is always what? -2, except in peroxides. Then the next thing is to write the valency, right? So what is the valency of nitrogen here? It is 5. And the valency of oxygen is what? 2. Remove the charge, what you have is what? Your valency. Then the next thing you want to do is to exchange the valencies. So when we do exchange of valencies, the 2 will come and meet nitrogen, and then 5 will meet oxygen. So when you exchange valencies, what you're going to have is N2O5, right? So with this, I've exchanged the valencies. Then the next thing to do is to write them down, right? So this is N2O5. They are not multiple of each other. They are not factors of each other. So therefore, this is the chemical formula of nitrogen 5 oxide. So writing the chemical formulas of oxide is actually very simple and straightforward. Again, an oxide is a compound that is formed when oxygen combines with other elements. And this is a very important fact, that the oxidation number of oxygen in all compounds is -2, except in peroxides where it is -1. And then we looked at what a peroxide is. A peroxide is a compound containing oxygen to oxygen single bond where oxygen atoms have an oxidation number of -1, right? So example of a peroxide is hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is written as H2O2, right? The oxidation number of oxygen in this compound is -1. Why is it a peroxide? Because it contains oxygen to oxygen single bond. And another reason why it is a peroxide is because the oxidation number of oxygen is what? -1. So structurally, hydrogen peroxide looks like this. It looks like this. This is hydrogen. And then you have the oxygen bond, single bond, oxygen to oxygen single bond. And then you have your hydrogen here, right? So this is the oxygen to oxygen single bond. Oxygen to oxygen single bond. That is why it is called a peroxide. And the oxidation number of oxygen here is what? -1. Very important. An oxide, H2O, which is water, right, is an example of an oxide. And the oxidation number of oxygen here is -2. So the structural formula or the structural architecture of water, it looks like this. This is hydrogen, and then you have oxygen, and then you have hydrogen, right? These are the other lone pairs of electrons, right? These are the lone pair of electrons in this oxygen atom in water. So these two dots, they are the lone pair of electrons. So this is an oxide. This is a peroxide. So what's the difference between the oxide and the peroxide? In peroxide, we have oxygen to oxygen single bond. So you can see this oxygen to oxygen single bond, right? While in oxide, we just have one oxygen atom bonded to the other elements. So this is an oxide. And the oxidation number of oxygen here is what? -2. The oxidation number of oxygen here in peroxide is -1. So again, like I said, we're going to look at the difference between peroxides and oxides in another video. But here we should be more concerned about how to write the chemical formulas of oxides, and we've looked at basically the oxides of nitrogen.